on Vice, is Afghanistan losing the war against the Taliban?
The Taliban
know that this is the time to show that they are here to stay.
What do you think will happen over the next few years?
And then, religious tensions spiraling out of control in France.
When politics gets very emotional, that's when it gets very dangerous.
We must train all people to defend themselves. Taliban. Apparently they're just 500 meters north of here.
The remaining staff of Charlie Hebdo operated out of this office. This could be a new target.
By the end of next year, America's war in Afghanistan will be over. Afghan forces will take the lead for security across the entire country. And our core objective, the reason we went to war in the first place, is now within reach.
At the end of 2014, America began withdrawing our combat troops from the longest war in U.S. history, Afghanistan. But even with the American-trained Afghan security forces taking over, large portions of the country are still controlled by the Taliban. Now, Vice correspondent Ben Anderson has been covering the war there for the last 8 years. So we sent him back to Helmand, the most contested province in Afghanistan, to get an on-the-ground look at the state of the country that we're leaving behind.
So this is Marja, which 5 years ago was the scene of the biggest military operation of the entire Afghanistan war since the initial invasion. And the idea was that US Marines would land here and clear the Taliban out and then hand over to the Afghan government. They called it government in a box. Very quickly, the Afghan government would not only provide security, but also run basic services for the people here. And the security situation here is still very precarious. Billions were spent here and many lives were lost. I didn't expect things to be perfect, but 5 years on, what I found was shocking. The government in a box never really arrived. So these boys, aged 10, 12 and 14, have to fight and defend their village. So can you describe what happened recently when the Taliban were very close?
Helmand gomra غردوي او گمی چرا غردوي برای حالت فکا شکا داګر مشتاشن کوپونه پر چلول پر دغه تاور وکړه پر هغه وکړه.
Were you fighting as well when they attacked?
Do you
find it hard to be brave when there's fighting?
هو د سلا چې اوس موږ کښېږدو بیا هم برته نه پرېږدي خو برته م وژني بیا زما پلار شهید کړي اوس زموږ ژوندي موږ خپل وطن نه ورلکو.
Well, you're much tougher than me. Good luck. You do the big one. These child soldiers, along with their entire family, are part of a US-created force called the Afghan Local Police. The commander is a 53-year-old woman named Ajani, who is also their grandmother. Ajani and her family fought the Taliban and were then put on the US payroll, although they never became part of the official Afghan National Security Forces. And the Taliban are still here.
دا ګرده سیمه اوس د طالبانو ده دا موږ خط لرو اخوا د دوی د بیرغونه د معلومیږي اوس هم معلومیږي د بیرغونه دا د اوس دی چې نه د ماسک دغسې دوی بس راځي د ورځې جنګ کوي د شپې جنګ کوي هغه به د ورځ هغه.
How much support are you getting from the Americans or from the Afghan government now?
خو دغه د ملاتړ خو کوي خو کمزور دي شی په لاس کې نشته ټانګان هم داسې کمزوري دي تیاري نه لري موږ چې اوس کمزوري سولو موږ دا رقم څه کمزوري سو 15,000 کوره په ما پسې دي نو زه خو مجبوره یم که مرم که پایم د دې ولس لپاره ناسته یم ته موږ لږ ته په کار وګرځه.
So we've left Ajani's home and we're walking towards just fields, no cover, no buildings. So if they attack, where do they come from?
او دغه زابر چې دی نه دی دغه ګرده د دې خط دی پر دغه سهار د ماښام اوس نسي هلته یې تاریه کړل هلته یې کلي دي هلته یې درې دي نه دی.
The whole point of the whole policy in Afghanistan was to clear out the Taliban and then hand over to the Afghan government. And here, this isn't a government force, this is a paid militia. Well, lots of things were promised as a result of the invasion, and lots of those promises now look like they were very idealistic. But it was certainly supposed to be a lot better than this.
2 weeks after we left, 2 of these boys were taken by the Taliban. Ajani responded by taking several family members of the Taliban herself, and a few days later, they exchanged hostages. We headed to Gereshk, also the scene of major US and UK operations and promises. But since the withdrawal, the violence has increased here as well. Here, the Afghan National Police have more of a presence and work alongside another group of local police. But the situation is equally as volatile, and the Taliban are everywhere.
Oh yeah, so there's a Taliban flag 300-400 meters away.
Yeah, don't steer up there. It's very dangerous.
They're saying don't spend too much time looking through these holes because of the snipers. And the snipers are good here?
Very dangerous. Big bullets. You shoot me in the tongue in 3 bullets, sniper. See? In here.
Oof. This is very close to your heart.
I'm very lucky. One time in ID. See?
This was shrapnel?
Yeah, yes.
You're lucky to be alive.
Very, very. One time, see, bullet here is out here. 6 time I injured.
That's too many.
Yeah, 7th time maybe finish.
Yeah. Hopefully there will be no 7th time.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So we're walking to the front line with the local police chief. So this is the green zone, which is the exact opposite of the green zone in Baghdad. There is the safest place in country. This is one of the most dangerous places because this is a perfect place for guerrilla fighting, the irrigation ditches and tree lines. It'd be so easy to bury an IED, cover it with mud, pour some water on it, and then within a few hours it looks exactly the same as all the other earth around it. Just bullets everywhere.
زموږ په 400 متري کې هغه د دشمن کړه لري چې طالبانو کمربند دی هغه لازم اخیری کمربند اخیری پوسټر د پولیسو.
That's the Taliban. You talk back to them or you just listen?
دوی خود به خود سره خطر.
خود به خود درس. اوریای. چای کی اوریای. خشمدانو.
And how much support are you getting from the British or the Americans?
نسته دا وایي.
Nothing at all, not even airstrikes or equipment or intelligence?
به دا یو کال به دا یو نیم کال مرسته چي مات.
Because they said that when they left, they would leave the Taliban weakened and you in a strong position to fight against them.
طالبان اوس 82 لري. ځکه لري چې هغه مرمۍ تقریبا 15000 متره دی په موټر کې انتقالېږي تشکل لري وساره وړاندې تر هغه ډېر وخت کوي سوي طالبان په هغه غټاونده طالبان مرمۍ د شرا ورغورځولې دي.
How often do they attack?
حمله کوي په هفته کې کوي په 2 ورځې کې کوي په 3 ورځې کې دا دوی په پلان چاړل دي.
So who's that firing now?
کمربند کې ټکان یاد لا وټکان ته ساو یو.
Yeah, that's artillery.
Yeah, دا شکل.
So we've only been here 5-10 minutes. And there's heavy fighting happening at a patrol base just in front of us. This is where we're exposed?
Yeah, just make a move fast. They're all snipers.
So he's saying that when they attack one patrol base, they tend to attack all of them, so he thinks this one's going to come under attack soon. And we'll be stuck here, so he wants us to leave.
Back at the police patrol base, we sat down with Commander Hekmatullah and his men, thinking we were safe.
So could each of you just explain what the security situation is today?
لکه څنګه چې معلومه ده چې د ګرش ولسوالۍ یو د هلمند ولایت د مهمه او ستراتیژیک ولسوالۍ څخه ده چې د هلمند لکه څنګه چې موږ ته اهمیت لري دومره و دښمن ته اهمیت لري. دښمن تپ او تلاش کوي چې دا سیمه خپل در کنټرول لاندې راولي.
What was that shot we heard? That was a sniper shot to this building.
نشانزانو بله.
You didn't even stop talking?
دا خو طبیعي خبره ده، موږ دې شیانو سره عادت یو.
You're a police force, but you seem to be more like an army. You know, you're actually fighting a war every day. How does that happen?
خو اساسي خبره دغه ده چې پولیس وظیفه چې دغه تنفیذ د قانون دی او هغه باید په ښارونو کې واوسیږي. خو اما زموږ اوس د افغانستان حالت داسې یو حالت راغلی دی چې هغه پولیس، امنیت ملي، اردوی ملي ټول په جنګ کې ښکېل دي.
And if the situation stays the same as it is now, what do you think will happen over the next few years?
معلوم نه دی، خدای ته معلوم دی چې سره کوم شي، دغه به خراب شي که به آباد شي، دا موږ ته څه معلومیږي.
2 days after we left, Commander Hekmatullah and 21 other men were killed by a massive IED. And the patrol bases we visited are now under the control of the Taliban. In the first year since the US combat troops withdrew, Afghan army, police and civilian casualties were higher than they've ever been since the start of the war. And this summer looks set to be even bloodier. We spoke with Dr. Vanda Felbab Brown, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. An expert on insurgencies and illicit economies, she frequently testifies about Afghanistan before Congress. What do you think the next few years hold for Afghanistan?
There is no doubt that the intensity of the military campaign by the Taliban is probably more intense than anything we have seen. The Taliban know that this is their time to show that they can reverse the momentum, that they are here to stay, to bloody the Afghan security forces, to break their will.
The withdrawal has already happened. In your view, did that happen because the US had achieved its goals or because the US had given up on achieving those goals?
One of the biggest criticism the White House President Obama has received is that decisions about troop levels, about withdrawals, have not been based on what's happening on the ground, but have been based on timelines set in Washington, timelines that were often insufficient. The Obama administration came to power talking about governance, accountability, sustained structures, institution building, but very quickly resorted back to very narrow counterterrorism goals: kill this Taliban commander, hunt down this Al-Qaeda operative, over trying to pressure for better governance.
This lack of pressure means that corruption has reached spectacular levels. One of the best examples of this is the opium trade, which has flourished despite the US spending an estimated $8 billion attempting to eradicate it.
1/3 of Afghanistan's GDP comes from poppy. It's totally unprecedented in history. We have never seen such overwhelming dependence on an illegal economy. That means that tremendous amount of people on all sides of conflict will be linked economically to the opium poppy.
There were poppy fields everywhere I went in Helmand, even inside a police base. In fact, the only fields I saw being destroyed were the ones that used to be controlled by the Taliban.
2 weeks there was full of Taliban.
These fields belong to the Taliban?
This field belongs to the Taliban, yes.
But they don't give up their land that easily. Just 2 days after we filmed with them, the counter-narcotics police were still destroying fields in the same area. But the Taliban detonated an IED when Commander Abdullah's men were close.
So, 3 of Commander Abdullah's men have been hit by an IED. Two injured. One was walking at least, but looked like he was blinded. His face was bleeding.
One person that is dead, he doesn't have no head.
The 2 survivors were taken to a hospital in the provincial capital.
This hospital is run by an Italian NGO called Emergency. People like him, even government security forces, still have to come to a foreign-run charity hospital to be treated, which just shows how successful the development and reconstruction really was. At this point in time, if things stay roughly as they are, hundreds of billions of dollars spent, thousands of lives lost, the end result was almost the exact opposite of what was promised.
And that's unfortunately how many Afghans see it. They feel betrayed and disappointed.
The Afghans I know talk and act as if they're facing a terrifying future.
And indeed, the president has been saying that we are ending the war in Afghanistan. And what he really should be saying is we are ending our part in the war in Afghanistan. For the Afghans, the war is still very, very much on.
In January 2015, two armed Islamic militants stormed the offices of French satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo. They opened fire on an editorial meeting, killing 12 people, injuring many others, and creating a solidarity movement around the globe. Now, this attack underscored the deep religious and ethnic tensions within France. The country is increasingly polarized, with growing distrust between France's Muslim and Jewish populations, and the rise of a far-right political party famous for its opposition to diversity. So we sent Vikram Gandhi to Paris to try to understand the deep-seated religious divisions that are tearing the country apart.
So we're on the block where the Charlie Hebdo attacks happened. The street is pretty eerie because you can see that there's little memorials for the staff members of Charlie Hebdo that were killed in the attacks. We're about to go into the offices of Libération. After the attacks, the remaining staff of Charlie Hebdo operated out of this office. And as you can see, this place is well guarded because many people believe this could be a new target for extremists. After passing through security, we spoke with Johann Hufnagel, deputy chief of the daily newspaper Libération, about why Charlie Hebdo, a fairly unknown satirical newspaper, became such a flashpoint. What does Charlie Hebdo do on its cover with cartoons and other images?
They want to give just a punch in the head of people. It's very provocative. In France, we are free to write or draw whatever we want. It's what we call freedom of speech. They don't have to take a gun and shoot people for this. When you see the cover of the one you have here,
could you explain what this?
You want to show the front page of Charlie Hebdo with Muhammad Prophet.
Are you nervous to be holding that?
I should think about it twice, yes, maybe. Some people die because they draw this.
Yeah.
Maybe I could die because I show it to you.
Fear of Muslim extremism is just one aspect of the social unrest that has been spinning out of control in France. In the past year, reported racist attacks and threats have spiked more than 30%. To learn more about the increasingly tense social divisions in France, we spoke with historian Andrew Hussey, professor of cultural history at the University of London.
Right now, France is full of very dangerous tensions. You've got this thing called jihad, which is a kind of global thing, and then all of a sudden it plays out at a very local level. Everybody who talks about Charlie Hebdo has got to say we do not condone in any way these massacres. Of course we don't condone them. But you've got to get into the mindset of the killers. France has got a Muslim population of about 5 to 6 million people. Most of them are from North Africa. And that's important because North Africa was colonized by the French. The fourth and fifth generation of Muslims in France, which is the generation you're dealing with now, are the angriest, most dispossessed. A lot live outside the big cities in what are called banlieues. They're not connected to the centre of French cities because the transport is bad and they're out in these places that have been badly constructed and so on. So you've got a group of people, immigrants to France, who feel disconnected, actually physically, from the centre of French life.
We went to one of these suburbs called Grigny, where the unemployment rate is as high as 20%, more than double the national average, to see what it's like to be a Muslim living in the outskirts of Paris. Here we found a distinct lack of solidarity with the Je suis Charlie movement.
C'est un peu faux cul de Je suis Charlie.
Parce que ce que Charlie faisait aussi, c'est pas bien. Après, vous pourrez dire, il y a des Charlie Hebdo aussi, ils font des caricatures sur les juifs et les chrétiens surtout. Mais en tout cas, nous...
c'est leur problème, c'est eux, ils acceptent...
Nous, en tout cas, en tant que musulmans, on ne peut pas accepter ça.
Parce que jamais vous verrez un musulman dénigrer une autre religion. Ça s'appelle la discrimination, ça.
Many in the French Muslim community also feel discriminated against because while laws protect freedom of the press, other laws crack down on religious expression in ways that make Muslims feel like they're being targeted. There's a ban on face coverings in all public places and a ban on religious clothing in government-funded schools. How do you feel about having to remove your headscarf when going into school?
C'est comme si j'étais prisonnière de leur façon de penser. Normalement, quand je suis dehors, normalement, les hommes ne doivent pas me voir sans le voile. Et eux, ils m'obligent à l'enlever. Ils obligent les hommes à me regarder. Et moi, j'ai pas envie de ça. On se sent comme si on était la seule cible.
If you're young, angry, unemployed, and Muslim living out in the banlieue, it may well be that the only part of your identity that feels authentic, that feels real, is actually your religious identity. So when the French government is saying, and you know what, we're going to take that away from you as well, that's the breaking point.
And while these rules govern all religions equally, there's a French law that many Muslims feel protects only one. The Gay-So law, meant to crack down on race discrimination, makes Holocaust denial illegal. But it doesn't ban cartoons like the Hebdo cover, which many here see as hate speech.
When you draw a cartoon of the Prophet, they have the right. But I don't have the right tomorrow to draw Sarkozy as Hitler. Why? Because the train who went to Auschwitz, they asked for specific laws and they got it. Cheers. Good work.
This feeling of grievance deepened last summer when the Paris police temporarily banned a protest against Israeli actions in Palestine. We visited a protest that was advertised as anti-racist in order to avoid a new ban. So is it right that pro-Palestinian protests have been banned in France, is that right?
But because of the double standard that the government is organizing, there is a state racism against the Muslim community, but there is no state racism against the Jews.
Here we saw how a growing anti-Israeli sentiment was turning into a new form of anti-Semitism among France's Muslim youth.
Tous ceux qui contrôlent le monde, c'est des juifs.
L'Israël, pour moi, c'est un peuple impur. Ça, de toute façon, c'est simple. Un jour, ça va se payer.
Reports of anti-Semitic actions in France have risen sharply since the 1990s. And in the past year, they've more than doubled. One of the more infamous attacks occurred 2 days after the Charlie Hebdo shootings, when Amadi Coulibaly, another Muslim extremist, attacked a kosher supermarket, demanding that the Hebdo attackers not be harmed. So this is the entranceway where Coulibaly walked through before he was shot and killed. People were hiding out in different areas. One of the employees brought down about 15 people into a freezer. And you can imagine these people were huddled in fear, waiting until the police were able to come and save them. After the January attacks, the French government deployed 10,000 troops to sensitive areas in France at a cost of about €1 million per day. And after only a couple of days in Paris, it was clear that most of these places were Jewish institutions. According to the Jewish Community Security Service, Jews are the targets of 51% of all reported racist acts. I went to meet an Orthodox family as they picked up their kids from a Jewish preschool that was surrounded by armed military. How do you feel about seeing these guards outside?
Aussi lointain que sont mes souvenirs, vraiment je n'ai aucune crainte qui apparaît. On pouvait se promener sans souci. Au jour d'aujourd'hui, la tension elle est palpable. Hein.
Et moi, d'une manière générale, bon, évidemment, j'ai peur pour les enfants, parce que si des terroristes décident d'attaquer des lieux juifs, alors c'est très facile.
À long terme, pour nous en tous les cas, pour notre famille, on pense que n'y a pas vraiment de futur sain. C'est pour ça aussi, une des raisons pour lesquelles on a décidé d'entreprendre les démarches pour l'ALIA.
In response to this wave of anti-Semitism, in February, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly endorsed mass immigration of Europe's Jews to Israel, otherwise known as Aliyah. And in Paris, pro-Israeli organizations hold informational conferences for those seeking to make Aliyah.
Prenez n'importe quel juif en France, il connaît quelqu'un qui s'est fait attaquer.
Il y a toujours de l'antisémitisme. Depuis les attentats, ça a fait un déclic. On n'est pas en sécurité ici.
As many as 10,000 Jews are expected to leave France this year in what can only be described as a mass exodus. And some of those who are staying behind are taking a more militant approach to their safety. The Betar, a 90-year-old Zionist youth movement, is training to defend Jewish communities in France.
We must train our people to defend themselves. Un juif qui est entre les mains, le Mechablim, l'Arabim, on doit y aller au péril de notre vie.
What's the link between Charlie Hebdo and Hyper Cacher? The people who
who did this. They are Islamists. They are taught that killing Jews is a good thing, so they take it in an extremist way.
Are you extremist?
Do I look like an extremist? People hate us, but we are still alive.
As the Batar movement prepares to defend its own, an ultra-right-wing political party is seizing on fears about extremism to promote their harsh anti-immigrant agenda. The National Front has a long history of xenophobia, and its founder, Jean-Marie Le Pen, is a notorious Holocaust denier.
Je ne dis pas que les chambres à gaz n'ont pas existé. Je n'ai pas pu moi-même en voir. Je dis qu'il y a des historiens qui débattent de ces questions.
Once a fringe party, the National Front is now headed by Le Pen's daughter Marine, and is one of the most powerful political parties in France. We dropped in at the National Front's headquarters on the night of the first round of departmental elections, which determined control of the local government councils. So the results just came in. The National Front has the second most votes out of any party. It is gaining in popularity, and Marine Le Pen, the president, is about to speak.
Ce vote massif pour le Front National montre que les Français veulent retrouver leur liberté. Vive la République et vive la France.
After Marine's speech, we had a chance to speak with her about the situation her country is facing. Would you say that there is a problem with radical Islam in France?
Oui, bien sûr. Il faut donc mener une lutte d'une fermeté totale et mettre en place la tolérance zéro à l'égard du fondamentalisme islamiste. Mais ça passe aussi par l'arrêt de l'immigration, car tout à fait évidemment, plus des gens rentrent, plus ils arrivent, si vous voulez, dans des ghettos, et plus ils sont aux prises avec ces lois qui sont imposées par les fondamentalistes islamistes. Après tout, il y a des dizaines de pays musulmans dans le monde qui appliquent la charia, plus ou moins durement. Vous avez la liberté d'aller vous y installer.
Some in France are taking a stand against sentiments like these, as we saw directly outside the National Front's headquarters. But when we spoke to the party's founder, Jean-Marie Le Pen, it was clear that he wasn't worried at all. So outside, there are people that are screaming fascist, and there are many people here that sound like they believe that your opinions are anti-Muslim.
Je n'en pense rien. Ce sont des manifestants minoritaires. Ce qui compte, ce sont les résultats des élections. Voyez-vous? Voilà.
The mood, the politics of atmosphere right now is very similar to the 1930s. And one of the things in the 1930s that's important is that people didn't know what was going to happen in the 1940s. So when we look backwards, we said, well, you know, it's obvious now that fascism was on the rise. Right now, Marine Le Pen is saying France is under threat, as we used to know France. And that is the same message that fascists carried in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Vive la France! If the National Front in France comes into government, then I think you'll not only see severe violent divisions in France, but actually across Europe. Nobody is making any rational decisions. Everything is very emotional. And when politics gets very emotional, that's when it gets very dangerous. So this is why you've got the rise of the far right, and that's why you've got the rise of anti-Semitism, that's why you've got people going off to Syria.
Explosez la France, réduisez la France en miettes.
What do you think about the National Front?
Fuck them. If one day she's president, we're gonna burn the shit down and start from scratch.